everyone. Welcome back to your Full Crew Newscast. I'm Don Zolda, your host this month, CEO of P3 Tech Consulting, and also a publisher at Autonomy Global. If I add one more thing to my title, I'm not even going to remember. But you know what? We are in a month we've dedicated to the fun theme of drones. It's drones, drones, drones today, all day, all the time. And we've got some interesting topics, everything from drone as first responder or DFR to the let's call it the dark side of drones. You know, some folks are out there doing nefarious things in the Caribbean, and we're just kind of waiting for the big one. And so we'll be covering that lone wolf scenario and what some folks are talking about. So welcome everybody. This is live. Drop your comments, your questions. Give us positive encouragement in the chat. We love all that. And I want to quickly thank our sponsors, and then we'll get to our amazing guests. So this production is brought to you and made possible by Meadow Lark Aircraft Company, Whisper Systems, Volatus Aerospace, and Carasoft. So we greatly thank our sponsors for making all of this possible. And now, without further ado, we're going to go around the horn, and our amazing guests are going to give you their 30-second elevator bio. So we'll start with Thomas Eder. He is from Nokia. So Thomas.
Thank you very much, Don. Hey, everybody. My name is Thomas Eder. I'm heading embedded wireless solutions at Nokia, and I usually say we do the fun stuff at Nokia. We are running the Nokia Drone Networks portfolio, and I think since 2007, being part of the company, my career has always tracked down the road of RF and 4G and 5G connectivity, and I call it my personal ambition and mission to reshape the world of connectivity for drones.
Well, thank you so much for what you're doing, and also for joining us all the way from Germany. We appreciate you. This is truly a global podcast, and bringing it back home actually to the U.S. in the Petro Metro right now in his car. We've got Kaye Cruz. So Kaye, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Good morning, Don, Alain, and Thomas. My name is Kaye Cruz. I'm with Skyfish Drone Operations. I've been in operation since 2019. I fly a drone 400 feet above the ground, and I also pilot underwater remote operating vehicles 400 feet underwater. Hence is the name Skyfish Drone Operations. I primarily work for major broadcast entities like ABC News, CBS, CNN, NBC. I do a lot of Dateline, I do a lot of 2020, and I do a lot of late breaking stories. So I entered the drone industry helping to support the broadcast images from disasters, natural disasters, things that happen all over the world as well as domestically. And so primarily they set me up to fly different events at different locations around the country in late breaking news, and that's Skyfish Drone Operations.
Awesome. And fun fact, I actually met Kaye virtually, I think, the first time on none other than Clubhouse a couple of years ago. That's I think,
right,
where we first connected, and met him in human form, of course, at the many industry events. And if you watch any of our shows, you've probably seen Kaye in the chat because he is, in fact, a super fan. So it's great to have you on this side of the camera today. And last but certainly not least, we've got Elon Gabriel. He is the pilot of the Caribbean podcast host, and just met him a couple weeks ago, actually, for the first time. So great to have you on the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi guys, thank you very much for having me, Don. So like Don said, my name is Elon Gabriel. I'm the host of the Pilots of the Caribbean podcast, where we talk about drones and how they're being used in the Caribbean. And in my day job, I am the operations coordinator for the leading drone service provider in the Caribbean, Hummingbird Drone and Robotic Services Limited, where we provide services using drones, robotic crawlers, ROVs, that kind of stuff. Primarily operating oil and gas space, so that's where a lot of my operational experience would have come from. And yeah, I'm excited to be on the podcast today.
And Alana is coming to us from Trinidad and Tobago today, so it is wonderful to have you coming from there. And let's get right into it, guys. Let's pop up Article 1 today, and this is Thomas's article. So Thomas, tell us a little bit about this article what it says basically and why you picked it.
Yeah. So that article itself is about a month old, and it's all about like the LAPD's like new policy with regards to the use of drones, as a first responder. And throughout the whole article, I think there is a nice way to see, on the one hand, that drones as a first responder is not only necessarily limited to direct responses of incidents and emergencies, and it really highlights how many different use cases, as like sub-use cases, a police department or a public safety authority can respond to as part of their drones as a first responder program. You have like protests, you have different tier of calls, and proactive and reactive monitoring type of applications. And I found it very good to read that very important to read that the LA Police Commission has approved this new policy on 24th of June. And to basically also, in combination with the approval of that policy, put a very strict target into place, which said that there has to be a report on progress within 6 months from the approval of the policy. And that's for me an important sign for both the industry, but also for drones as a first responder in general, from a technology stack perspective, as it shows, the industry and the police departments and authorities are moving in the right direction. And the focus is more on not on using drones, but what is actually the outcome for the people on the ground. And obviously, the article also mentions in the last section police departments like Chula Vista, who are really one of the leading ones in the US, which are setting standards more or less for drones as a first responder operations. And it's like the combination of all the very valuable and important content of the article with this information being in the Los Angeles Times as a very non-techie type of publication shows how much drones as a first responder are becoming more and more important.
Yeah, I agree, Thomas. And being an attorney and a nerd, and having helped craft some of the Department of Defense's domestic drone use policies, I thought it was really interesting that they shifted the command of drones in the LAPD from the Air Support Division, where I think a lot of different law enforcement agencies might have it, to what they call their Office of Special Operations, right? And just to be clear, everybody, if you don't know what DFR is, it's basically, they're deploying the drone in response to a 911 call to be first on scene and kind of give that look, drone as first responder, right? What LAPD did with this policy, which they had really limited it to highly dangerous cases. Like they were only using drones in the most extreme environments, like barricaded suspects or explosives and things like this. They've opened up the aperture a little bit to make sure, not just for the calls for service, the 911, like Chula Vista, which kind of coined the DFR term, but other investigations and large-scale events and natural disasters. So I agree with you, Thomas. They've really expanded this and shown that drones can be used for so many different things from a public safety perspective, not just the super high-risk environments, right? Although very important there. So thanks for giving us this article. I'd like to let's go with Elon first. Why don't you kind of give your thoughts on this one?
I think, like you mentioned, Dawn, it was interesting that they moved it away from the air support department, is where you typically find drone units tend to kind of sit by default, I guess, because of the association. But it's good to see that, they're kind of treating it not as its own entity, but in a different perspective, where they give it the priority and oversight of it to a different division, not just, because it's associated with airspace, we'll give it to the area. So I think that was an interesting move on their part, and I would like to see how it works out in the long term. And I'd like to see more police departments implement something similar.
Yeah, because they're just focused more on it as a tool, not as just a straight up aircraft, right? Like we can use this for many different of our special operations, I think seems to be that thought process. How about you, Kaye? What are your thoughts here?
Well, you know, the drone, like you said, it's been a tool, but it's also been an evolution. It's been an evolution of people beginning to not think so linear with it and being able to adjust themselves to the environment that they're first responders to or the type of events that they might cover. And so, yeah, it's an important move that they're making right now to go in this direction. And it's real interesting when I go to these conferences and I listen to law enforcement and how they use their drones. It's almost like they brought themselves in close, but they haven't broadened their view out because the scenarios are always forever changing around the globe and domestically in the United States. And it's kind of hard to keep up with everything that's going on out there because you're focused in on your community and in your division. But yeah, Thomas, you know, you bring up some really good points on what you just shared with us there.
And speaking of community, we've got a vibrant community out there in the YouTube land and LinkedIn. And we've got Bill Schultz saying thank you for your contributions in this panel. So thanks for watching. We appreciate all you guys out there and gals. So I'm going to bring it back to you, Thomas. You know, I know Europe is, let's just put it this way. Europe has pretty strict privacy rules with the GDPR. And, you know, obviously in the United States, privacy is also a great concern, especially when it comes to law enforcement use of drone technology. I think, you know, the civil libertarians, when they think about drones and law enforcement, that's the first thing they'll raise, not only safety, but of course, privacy. And so I thought it was interesting that right off the bat, when they released this new policy to the public, which by the way, they were very transparent about it, you know, they said, look, we're not going to use this to monitor protests. You know, and if we did, it would only be for officer and other safety purposes. And we're not going to track individuals unless they're engaging in criminal activity. So in other words, read between the lines. This is not for ubiquitous surveillance of the general public. This will be very specific use cases approved by the right people in the organization. So that's the right way to go. What are you seeing in Europe, Thomas, in terms of things like this? Are you seeing DFR or existing DFR programs expanding in this manner as well?
Yeah. So let me take this privacy and, you know, data security topic, and there are a couple of angles to look at it from. And let me give an example first. We have spent a lot of time lately in Beverly Hills, and in Beverly Hills, if you walk through, you know, the city center or the downtown, you notice that there are a lot of cameras. Like there is video cameras that are basically managed by the police, like on every block corner, and the police today, in not only in the US but in many countries, is owning such kind of video surveillance infrastructure, and they have already established means and measures and policies on how to deal with such data, and how to deal with it in terms of privacy and so on. And there are, you know, like if you look close in the software ecosystem, there are the Motorola's and the Axons and the likes, which have software solutions that do nothing else than managing video data for public safety agencies, and you know, having file vaults and certified ways of storing data and so on. It's all established. It's all state of the art already, and from that perspective, having now a drone monitoring certain activities, no matter if it's now a proactive or a reactive type of surveillance, is nothing else. It's just that the video camera is now flying. So I kind of want to call to action situation, relax. It's nothing new that is being done here. But on the other hand, it's obviously also very important that we refresh all our minds on a and our level of information on a regular basis, and understand that public safety, the first responders, the authorities know how to deal with such data.
Yeah, no, I get it. You know, I think the big difference, obviously, it can be mobile and can literally track. I think, you know, and maybe go places that a static camera won't, right?
Right.
So, but, you know, look, people have concerns, and I think LA, just from this article that you provided, Thomas, is doing a great job of saying, this is what we're doing. This is how we're doing it. This is our exact process. What we will not be using it for. So, I mean, I think that just goes a long way. There's always going to be critics. But, you know, the bottom line is, and we've seen this with statistics from Chula Vista PD and some of these other organizations, and as you said, it's growing exponentially, this DFR use case, that it's saving lives. And it's not just saving officer lives, it's saving citizens' lives by de-escalating situations early on. So when there's situational awareness, you can, you know, as an officer, you can breathe a little more easy knowing what exactly you're walking into. And that makes, you know, people are probably a little less trigger happy, to use that term, you know, because they kind of know what they're expecting when they get there. So I think that's great. You know, so I don't know if you want to close us out on this one. We'll move to the next article, Thomas.
I just want to put something in real quick here.
Go ahead, Kaye.
I think what affects the society as a whole is that the drone is the closest thing that they see that they consider invades their privacy. They know that satellite operations is going on with high-end photography that's been going on for a long time. They see it. They know that everybody out there has got an iPhone, and so it's like, oh, they're taking some video, or is it of me, or is it past me? Or they know that there's a security cam virtually everywhere they go. And those are sort of like, they're the inanimate objects because they're just objects, although there's people that are controlling them. But with the drone, it's the one thing that they all like look up and see all of a sudden. And I think that's what brings that social uneasiness and fears, like somebody's watching over me, because it's like right there above them. So yeah, it obviously it is important for law enforcement to kind of lay that platform out there, how they use it, why they use it. But that's the thing that I get a sense of more than anything, is that people have this, all of a sudden this, oh, there's a drone in the sky, why? And that sets everybody on edge.
Well, you know, and I've said this before, and people laugh at me, but I'm being serious. I wish drones looked like something other than a big spider in the sky. Like, you know, no, like they, you know what I mean?
Right.
They don't look cute. They look scary. And, you know, you see an airplane, nobody's scared by that. A helicopter, not really. Even a little drone that looks more like a helicopter is probably a little less frightening to people than a quad or like an octocopter or something, you know. And they're usually dark colored, you know, and they just look like these flying like spiders. But you know, if it was my choice, they'd be pink and they'd be fuzzy. So anyway, moving on. Let's go next. We got to go to the next article. Mike's in the background telling me let's move on. So this one is Elon. So let's tell us a little bit about this one.
So this article came up, and it was geared towards the implementation of new rules around UAVs in the Caribbean. And I wanted to speak about this one because I had some conversations around it recently, and it raised some critical points about the proliferation of drones and weaponization of drones, and how that could be something that could eventually find its way into the Caribbean. I made reference to a couple of events that happened in Colombia and Mexico recently. And as early as this year, it started speaking about some of the events that are happening in Haiti with private companies and how they're using drones to deal with the gang situation over there. But what I wanted to speak about it was that I had a sort of pushback against one of the suggestions that was the suggestion I was put forward to as a solution. And they basically took it in 4 steps. And the 4 steps were to ban, impose, distinguish, and secure. So I find that we in the Caribbean already are in a place where we are behind the rest of the world from my perspective in terms of how we accept and utilize drones throughout the Caribbean. So I think that the response being, the first step being to ban them outright is a kind of a step in the wrong direction. And we should be looking to implement systems that are available to help manage and monitor, to educate the public, to formalize things like licensing. That should be the approach. And, bearing in mind that there are smaller islands who, based on their size and their resources, may not be able to, afford to implement their standalone systems. We do have a group called CARICOM in the Caribbean, if you guys are familiar. That's basically a group of the islands, or the group of islands that come together and, act as one body in terms of trade and certain policies and that kind of thing. And the article does speak to leveraging CARICOM, but not in the way that I think would be helpful to the promotion of drones and the technology. I think sorry.
I was just going to say, for those that don't know, CARICOM is the Caribbean Community. It's an implementation agency for crime and security. That's the kind of the subgroup, the impacts group out of CARICOM is making these 4 suggestions. So sorry, Alon, keep going. No,
that's fine. So I think that a balanced approach should be taken when it comes to drones, and not just to me putting us in a position where we take a step back and just kind of allow the drones that we're familiar with, because it speaks specifically to allowing drones for photography and mapping purposes, while not taking into consideration, technologies that you might not be aware of that could benefit the Caribbean as a whole. So you just sort of, kind of keep everything else out and use these as the allowed systems. And I think that would do the Caribbean a greater harm than any sort of potential.
Yeah, absolutely. So to kind of elaborate on those 4 recommendations, the first ban that Alon was talking about was to ban drone imports, except for law enforcement, period. And that's the one he's taking beef with. Number 2, impose strict penalties for misuse. All good there. Restrict drone models to harmless civilian grade designs. Okay, I mean, stinks for your militaries. And then last, the 14 member states should be pushing the United Nations for a treaty by 2026 to ban lethal autonomous weapon systems without human oversight. And that's like, we could do a whole show just on that, right? On the military uses and autonomy and human in the loop, not, fully autonomous vehicles and things like this, weapons. But, the ban one, I agree with you. I mean, we just heard from Thomas's article. We just spoke with Thomas's article about just disaster response, and it's not just law enforcement that responds to those incidents. I assume in the Caribbean, it's probably a lot of other groups, maybe even volunteer groups that go in and help in these horrible situations. And if you banned a drone, import for that purpose by that group, or any group other than law enforcement, you've just kind of cut off your nose to spite your face, as they say. So this is a really intriguing article to see, this Caribbean group kind of buckling down and saying, hey, we need to lock this down before it comes here in a big way, like we're seeing in Haiti, we're seeing in Colombia. Kaye, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think for being in the Caribbean, and I've been to Antigua and Aruba and the American and British Virgin Islands, I've been in and out of the Caribbean quite a bit. I'm just wondering if whether or not, and this would even apply domestically, I'm just wondering if it would be important to assemble a public service announcement that is broadcast to the different broadcasting entities and the streaming entities in the Caribbean that says, hey, we're a collective of people that utilize drones for these activities that help in post-disaster from hurricane, that help in the topography of us, building roads and infrastructure, in search and rescue, and in law enforcement when things are far away and you're wondering, when is law enforcement going to be on our part of the island to help us? Well, we've dispatched a drone team and we're trying to get there and resolve and oversee a situation that might be taking place. And much here, like in the US, whether it's regional, whether it's state, whether it's city by city. I think that activity, that if we started to present ourselves out there as to what it does in the community and for the well-being of the community, then maybe that opens up people stepping back for a minute and realizing what the value is of what we do as commercial drone operators, and first responders and law enforcement and military, that everyone gets a better sense of wrapping their arms around who we are and what we do.
Well, education is key. Kay, we know that. I mean, that's just always an uphill battle. But it really ties into a comment Bill Schultz made earlier in the chat. And I'm going to pose this one to Thomas as he's next. Bill says, I use drones as a service in the physical security space. How do you see educating customers to alleviate all the fears we've been talking about? We talked about privacy, we talked about safety, and now here we're talking about security in the context of Alan's articles, and some recommendations were made that include banning drones other than for law enforcement. Thomas, how do you recommend, have you seen some best practices in that communication space, in that education space from law enforcement or otherwise? Hey, everybody, this is what we're doing.
The article that I had was a great initiative of proactive education. And I typically say that if we are doing something new, no matter if I talk as a public safety person or, also in the example of Bill here with the physical security space, like if your neighbors are concerned, well, the neighbors should hear from you that you're going to use drones for a physical security space. Then them coming to you to ask, hey, what on earth are you doing here? So going out and communicating openly and proactively is the one thing. And then the other thing is 120% compliance, like if there is 120% compliance, then there is like absolute adherence to the existing legislation. And then you can feel at least comfortable, and not only comfortable during the operations, but also comfortable during actually the like communication towards the neighbors or whoever is affected by the potential operations. On Alan's article, I must say that I believe this is a normal process we see here, and there is certainly where you find new technology, you need new policy making. I have gone with Nokia through 3G, 4G, 5G, a couple of evolutions of the communications technology stack, and each technology stack needs a new legislation on frequency use and whatnot. And the same applies, in my opinion, to the use of drones or any type of autonomous technology in our modern world. So we need to, as you say, proactively push policy making and support the policymakers with the knowledge on what this new technology is capable of, no matter if it's good or bad. And from that perspective, like influence the policy making to the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I tell them the good stories, right? I mean, Alan, you do this on your podcast all the time. And for those that aren't subscribed, please do that. In fact, you can find Alan's podcast on my Autonomy Global Network YouTube channel. More on that next week. Hint, hint. But we also have some folks out in the chat that are loving this. Bowen's 360 is saying so cool. And Dark Night Studio is here. So thank you for showing up and enjoying the show. We appreciate you. Keep it all coming. We love all this stuff. But I'm going to give it back to you, Alon, in terms of, kind of closing us out on this article. It is provocative. We've seen bans in other contexts, like in the U.S. and, kind of those country of origin bans in terms of China with some security risks and things like that. And these things get very visceral. People get very energized about bans in general, but to just say no one can use them but law enforcement, I think would be a big miss in terms of very positive societal use cases that may not happen in places that frankly may need it. So love for you to close us out on this article you selected.
Yeah, Thomas, you made the points about legislation. I think that is one of the biggest things that we're lacking in the region. Most countries don't have, established drone rules, and if they do, they haven't evolved over time. So, like for instance, here in Trinidad, ours was formed in 2016, and I don't think it has been amended since to cater for, the increase in technology and trends and that kind of thing. So, what I would just like to say is that, legislation would be a good start, educating the public, providing some sort of formal education to the operators, because lots of operators out there are willing and want it. They just don't have anywhere to get it in the region. And I think that all of that, together with the mitigation technologies that are available, would help. I mean, maybe not eliminate this risk, because there's no zero in this, but to help mitigate the potential that is mentioned in this article and move away from the point of totally banning to finding a way to work with the drones in the system and remove that risk as much as possible.
Yeah, excellent. Great wrap up. Thank you so much for that. And before we get to article number 3, our final article for the day, I want to give one more shout out to our sponsors for this show: Meadowlark Aircraft Company, Whisper Systems, Volatus Aerospace, and Caresoft. Again, this show would not be possible without their support, so we are definitely grateful to them. And last but not least, we've got Kaye's article coming up here. So let's go ahead and pop that one up. All right, Kaye. I love the title, The Lone Air Wolf. It's very intriguing. Tell us about it.
Yeah, Dr. Woody Davis and I put that together right before the Exponential 2025 conference here in Houston in May of this year. And I've been around law enforcement for a very long time. They're a first responder to mass shootings. I'm a first responder to get on the ground and get things set up for broadcast for whatever national correspondent is coming in. And, I've seen Uvalde, I've seen the Walmart mass shooting in El Paso, the Sunderland Springs outside of San Antonio, all the way back to Columbine. And everything that's occurred, we've always seen it's the lone wolf. How much do we know of this individual that has gone and gunned down these people? What's their social media? What things did they lay out prior to executing the violence that they put on different parts of America and different communities, all the way down to the person that drove their car into a big crowd in Bourbon Street in New Orleans on New Year's Eve. And these lone wolves, in the last few years, virtually everybody's been captivated by the Ukrainian and Russian drone wars. And everyone is able to go to any part of social media and all the different platforms and see all these instruments of destruction that are taking place. And so this nefarious character, I wanted to write this article to emphasize to law enforcement that while you're looking on the ground for the continuous ground attack in the societies around the country, there is somebody out there, or there is a collective out there that is like, let's transfer this over. Why come from the ground when we can come from the air? So from the lone wolf, they become the air wolf. And with so many different devices to deliver different payloads, there's so many open targets that sit around these communities. When you go to NRG Stadium and you're watching an NFL football game, you have this dome of protection in the sky, right? World Series, any kind of large events, big soccer events. And so you always have like this, compact, compartmentalized protection of airspace. But yet, if, like I pointed out in the 10-day event, it takes place in all the different streets of San Antonio. It's an open forum, or you have Austin city limits, ACL in Austin, right there along Riverside, open targets of people that are out there in mass. And nobody's really looking for that airwolf to come along, because when law enforcement is basically going over these groups, they're going over it to see where you might need crowd control, the safety of people coming to an event, and to see if anybody is coming on the ground that might, cause a problem. But it's from the sky that I don't see them taking an observation to. And so that was my purpose for writing From the Lone Wolf to the Airwolf. When are we going to see it? Because in my gut, for all the years that I've been covering mass killings and mass shootings, I sense it arriving. I got a sense that Airwolf is out there, and it's going to be unfortunate, but I believe that law enforcement right now needs to lock in and begin to think in a different pattern other than just observing crowds from above.
Well, Kay, well, first of all, thanks for writing this article to raise awareness. And you're fully aware, right? Drones like groups like Drone Responders, I think 10,000 strong globally. They've been talking about this. Heck, just in the United States, and a drone landed on the White House lawn in 2015, everybody. I mean, hello, right? And then we had New Jersey drone gates. So if the law enforcement community was asleep at the wheel, and I don't think they have been, like, I'm just going to say it, I don't think they have been. New Jersey opened everybody's eyes because it was crazy. Like, we all saw, we call it drone gate for a reason. I mean, it was a cluster. It was clear that nobody knew what was going on. The right hand wasn't talking to the left. And I think the real problem is not law enforcement's lack of awareness. It's their lack of authorities to, number one, even to, detect or identify, at least that's what some people think. And number two, some important people that might be enforcing the laws. And number two, to, of course, mitigate, because we only have the 5 federal agencies allowed to do it, right? So they just don't have the tools to deal with it. I don't think it's a lack of awareness, but this concept of lone wolf, it's one we don't really. I like the lone air wolf, this phrase that you've coined, because it's not something people are thinking about. They are thinking about groups like in Alon's article, that the Haiti gangs that are using, that's a group. The National Liberation Army, the Colombian guerrilla group. We're seeing groups. We're seeing Ukraine, Russia. We're not seeing the lone wolf actor, though. And so your point there, I think, is very well taken. This is the person in their garage deciding on their own, they're just going to make it happen. And so far, we haven't seen that, really. I don't think. I mean, I'm going to throw it out to Alon. Are you aware of any lone wolf actors that have deployed a drone either in the Caribbean for nefarious purposes or otherwise that have come to your attention?
So, sorry, from the lone wolf aspect of it, no, what we tend to see, like you mentioned, with more organizations. So we have, track things like smuggling, contraband into the prisons, illegal shipments, that kind of thing, but not really from a lone wolf perspective that I can think of. But it does pose a similar question to what my article, sort of focused on, but yours more from a very pointed perspective, and how we deal with that going forward.
Yeah, that's the lone wolf is hard. A group is easier to spot, and they might be chatting even if it's on the dark web, where people can even possibly figure that out. But the one guy in his garage, that's the one that's the one that might be keeping us up at night. Thomas, what are your thoughts on this article?
Look, great article overall, very important to raise the awareness on it. One important part from my perspective of that article is that the federal and everybody who should be accountable of ensuring safety for us people on the ground, no matter from where the danger is coming from. Is it now a group or a lone wolf? Like, everybody's trying to kind of build their own little kingdom. For me, the federal authorities need to work together with the local authorities and the national authorities. There should be some kind of clubbing that would also enable then like a solid investment into infrastructure that can be deployed statewide, nationwide, or at least citywide to prevent such happenings. The technology to prevent such incidents is there. It's just, like I look at traffic safety. Like, if you want to cross a road, you prefer to cross the road where you have the right infrastructure for it. The right infrastructure is a traffic light, and I rather cross my street where I have a traffic light that tells me you can go or not than somewhere else. So I would rather feel better if I would live in a city or somewhere where I have infrastructure during events that prevent such incidents. That's how I look at it. So
yeah, I love that you took this to infrastructure, honestly, because my brain didn't go there. But you raise a great point about community investment and pooling resources to have the infrastructure needed, right? So Jason Day, he's with the Austin Department of Public Safety, wrote an article for Autonomy Global, Drones as a Service for Public Safety. It's still one of our most popular articles, I think, because he raises this issue of, look, individually, I mean, honestly, it's almost ironic. To fight the lone wolf, you have to pool your resources together. In other words, you can't do it alone. Regardless of what agency you are, law enforcement, a municipality, a school, someone that might use Bill Schultz's, company for security as an example. That could be a critical infrastructure owner, asset owner. So this idea of pooling resources for infrastructure, I think, is a conversation that needs to mature, because that is the way this is going to work. And I think, Thomas, I don't know if you can share or not, because you're working with Beverly Hills on the DFR stuff. You pulled this LA article. Are you seeing communities moving towards this resource pooling in terms of not only counter drone technologies, but also the infrastructure needed for ubiquitous drone operations, whether it's UAS traffic management or otherwise?
I haven't seen the pooling in particular yet in those projects where we work on. But I see that the communities themselves and the owners of the programs are pushing towards this, call it counter UAS infrastructure, or also the air traffic monitoring type of infrastructure. Mostly due to the reasons of like clearing the airspace and like leveling up a little bit the permits. But the positive side effect is that you can reuse the same type of infrastructure or enhance that infrastructure then later on also for counter UAS type of applications. But I don't see that pooling as of today. But like many states, many players, many kings around the table that want to build their own kingdom. So
Good point.
some alliance type of thing would be needed in order to shape that for each country.
Well, and I'll tell you what, again, going back to the law, I don't know what it's like in Europe or in the Caribbean, but just having been in the federal government, there are such strict rules. It's called fiscal law around the use of whatever Congress appropriates and how that money is deployed. So for example, the Department of Homeland Security, could they take some of their funds if it's not explicit and pool resources, let's just say with the city of New York, just being hypothetical here? I think that's really hard to do, honestly. I know it sounds silly, but the actual physical transfer of funds and the purpose for which they were, appropriated and allocated, mixing and then adding private funds in there, it just makes my head hurt. Like, fiscal law is one of those areas of law where you don't really beg forgiveness. It's like either it says you can do it and you do it. You don't just do it because it doesn't say you can't, if that makes sense. So I think this is a big barrier that people aren't talking about. I'd love for some creative attorneys out there to start offering some solutions and some ramps, like we're seeing, for example, on the acquisition side in the DoD with, Secretary Hegseth's recent memo, kind of opening up Defense Innovation Unit. Some of the things we're seeing in that space, the money piece has to be solved. Just having ways to acquire them, that's one thing, but how do you pool that money so it's not just the Air Force and the Navy? It's, Air Force, Navy, DHS, and I don't know, the city of Houston, if that makes sense in the right context. So this is a tough nut to crack, but thanks for raising it. And I love that we went a little sideways, but that's what I love about this show. People bring these articles and it takes us in all kinds of directions. But I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you all a chance, Kaye. I'm going to bring it back to you. And then I'm going to have each one of you just kind of say your farewells, tell folks what's next for you and how they can reach you. Okay. So, Kaye, we're going to go back to you to kind of wrap this article up, and then go ahead and do your closing remarks if you don't mind.
All right. Well, the way I'd like to wrap the article up is that filmmaking has a lot of inventions, and this is where a lot of people gather ideas from a number of action films, and they bring it together and they say, I can do that, or I've got a more creative way. Gaming has a lot to do with that. So those sometimes become an inspiration for the nefarious player to say, like, I can do that because the film business did that, or the television business did that, or a good fiction writer did that. And that's what kind of sparks that mind. And that's one of the principles of why I wrote this article, because I thought of a number of scenarios which would not feel safe disclosing on our broadcast here today. But in closing, for me, my next space is that I've gotten certain approvals to go offshore. I've got my TWIC certification. I'm slowly moving out into the deep, kind of getting back into the ocean while I'm still doing things that are in the air, which Skyfish Drones does. I'm going to start taking a more movement offshore and getting back to the ocean for a while. So I just want to thank, Don, yourself, your sponsors, Thomas, Elaine, for being a part of this today. I've certainly enjoyed meeting you all here in the digital world, but that's how I just like to close it.
Awesome. In the human world, what might we see you next? You're going to be at Commercial UAV?
I'm trying to. That's in September, right?
Yeah, in Vegas.
Yeah, I always like to go there in September, one, because it's kind of, they call it dark, but there's not a lot of performances, although I like to see a lot of live bands. But yeah, that's kind of where my next target is to get out there. And I think it's the Workboat Conference that they have in New Orleans in November.
Yeah.
And those two would be my primaries in fall.
Okay, awesome. Those are both run by Diversified Communications, so very cool. All right, thanks a lot, Kaye.
Thank you.
Elon, tell us what's next for you.
So next for me would be, I would be at Elevate UAV 2025, that's sponsored by Drone Nerds in Miami in October. So the Pilots of the Caribbean podcast is a media partner of the event. So I'm getting I'll have some other Caribbean pilots there with me as well, and some other things that we're working on in the background. You can find me the video version of the podcast on YouTube, audio version anywhere you get podcasts for free. Website of the podcast will be pilotsofthecaribbeanpod.com. You can contact me on LinkedIn. Yeah, but to close out my article, I think that we are at an inflection point in the Caribbean where it's time that we stop responding and reacting to everything that is taking place outside and see the potential of this industry and take it by the horns and run with it. Because I think that as operators, we understand that the threats can be serious, but the way that it was put forward in this as a blanket ban and then kind of filter out from there would do more of a disservice to have any sort of significant benefits in the region. And I think that operators in the region are willing to work with the organizations, regulatory bodies to do what is needed to move forward. So we don't have a situation where, we're fighting against full bans and those kinds of things. Yeah, and that's why I think we should be looking to head instead of the opposite direction.
I love that. Thank you so much. And last but not least, Thomas.
Thank you. I think work-wise, what brings me to North America next is the projects in Southern California. We also got some exciting stuff coming up in New York State, but then I think in terms of conferences, I believe the Commercial UAV in Vegas is going to be the next stop during September. Wrapping my article up and the general talk here. Thank you very much also to the peers and to Dawn for hosting it. I think we are, public safety first responders are traditionally not known to be like the most innovative minds and always at the leading edge of technology. We in the public safety technology space is very traditional, and people tend to rely on things that have been established for a couple of years. And when we talk about drones as a first responder, and that's really a call to action to the whole industry folks, we are privileged right now that the first responders are dealing with such new technology, that they are starting to adopt it, that we see funds running into it. And the whole industry right now has a very, very important responsibility to do something useful with those funds, with those projects, and like rather under promise and over deliver instead of vice versa. Let's treat the trust and the drive for innovation of the public safety authorities out there right now as a privilege and in a very responsible manner.
I love that. That's a great way to close out the show. What an interesting thread from kind of,
Good
we
one,
got
Thomas.
both sides of the coin. We have the DFR, and then we have those that might use it, and then kind of the thread that sews them all together is really the need for authorities and infrastructure and public acceptance. So, great show, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for those in the chat. Once again, in closing, thanks to our amazing sponsors. We've got Caresoft, a Meadowlark Aircraft Company, Whisper Systems, and Volaris Aerospace. Really great stuff. As what's next for me tomorrow, join us on the Dawn of Autonomy. If you want to talk about extreme drone operations, no one encompasses this better than Dr. Jack Elston from Black Swift Technologies out of Boulder, Colorado. Hurricanes, tornadoes, you name it, this guy's flying through it and building drones to do that. So we'll get his update as the hurricane season looms large here in the U.S. And then next week, I'm going to be live at the AUVSI Drone and AAM Policy Symposium. So check out that stream on Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern, and hope to see some of you in person there. And then getting back to commercial UAV, if you haven't bought your tickets yet, number one, get them. Number two, get them for Monday, Labor Day in the U.S. We're going to have another party Monday night with Caresoft to kick off the week. It's become the annual flash mob. It's become a tradition. I think we're in year 5, and every year it's better and better. So hope to see you all there. Follow me on LinkedIn if you don't know what I'm talking about, and certainly sign up for our Autonomy Global newsletter. All right, everybody, that's all she wrote. Thank you so much. We are out here.